And we're live. Good evening. Welcome to the Village of Gulf Manor Records Commission meeting for Monday, February 14th, 2022, 5:30 p.m. We're meeting in council chambers. And Mr. Lanza, could you do a roll call of the committee, please?
Yeah, Mr. Hurth,
Here.
myself, present, Mr. Donlin,
Present.
Ms. Van Pelt,
Here.
and Ms. Bergen.
Here.
All members are present.
Thank you. And we also have Chief Campbell from the Gulf Manor Police Department joining us. One of the things we need to do, since we are reconstituting this committee, is we need to adopt Robert's Rules of Order or Procedure to conduct the committee. Do I hear a motion to adopt Robert's Rules?
Motion.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and if everyone's had an opportunity to review the agenda, do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So we do not have any minutes to approve for this particular meeting. And I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Donlin to talk about the task ahead of us.
Thank you. Several years ago, the village adopted what's commonly called an RC2. And the process is to file it with the state of Ohio, and that approves our records retention and destruction policy. A lot has happened on the records front since then. So one of the steps I think we need to take is to update our records retention destruction policy. So what I've passed out to everybody is, first of all, the step-by-step process that the Ohio Historical Commission, or is now Historical Connection, that they recommend that we take, the steps we take, and then a model Ohio Municipal Records policy, which would be the RC2. What I'm recommending we do is to get ourselves up to date by adopting that RC2, but go for looking for some of these areas where we probably need to update ourselves. One, we no longer have a fire department. One of our discussions has been in the transition, what records we would retain, what records Little Miami would take, what records would go to Deer Park, Silverton. That's still in the process of being sorted out. So I think when we get that sorted out, then we would update this relative to what records we are retaining, how we're retaining them, at what period of time we need to retain them. That would also allow us at that point in time to identify records we're going to destroy because we don't need them. So that's an example of where I think that this is a working document, a work in progress. The other thing that we've encountered with the police department updating their technology is we're now going to have a lot of video that we're going to generate, body cameras, community cameras, and we ought to have a very clear policy as to what we retain. I think the cloud-based company, Chief, that we signed on with, they have an automatic destruction policy that unless we, like for the community cameras,
Yes.
unless we request that they retain it or we download and retain it, they have, correct me, is it 6 months?
I believe it's 30 days that's automatically purged unless we pull it for investigative purposes.
And that would be an example of where we would want the policy updated. Because if they're doing every 30 days by their contract, and our contract here says you got to keep it for 6 months, when they destroy it in 30 days, we're creating a violation. We're creating that. So that's where I want us to dig into this and say, okay, what do we want to see? The department had Lexipol policy that we shared a couple months ago. But again, Lexipol has a policy that may not integrate well with our policy nor the cloud policy. So that's something that once we adopt this, we should probably convene for even just a few minutes in 30 or 60 days and make that modification. Because the problem is under the public records law, if you destroy a record and it's not consistent with your schedule of destruction, you can be liable $1,000 a day, up to $10,000 for the days that that record's been missing. And these are the kind of things that just trap you. And I want to make sure that we're not trapped. This also brings us into compliance when we do our audits, that now the auditor's office is saying, let's see your records retention policy. let's see your records production policy, which we've adopted a few years ago. And they're checking that box if you have it or don't have it. And unfortunately, many communities don't have it.
Right. And I just confirmed it is 30 days.
It is 30.
Yes.
So that's an example. I mean, you see these categories in this larger document. General administrative records. We keep agenda for 6 years. We keep department reports, attendance reports. And then you get into the more specifics. Again, here's an example of where we don't necessarily operate is on page 10, building, planning, and zoning records. We don't get the building records. Building records go to Hamilton County for the building department. So like item number 12, residential plans for 3 years, commercial plans for 5 years, municipal owned structures forever. We would say, we don't do that work anymore. It's not necessary for us to adopt that rule. And when we last met, which was several months ago, we talked about doing this. The hardest thing is to think what I don't have. So that's why if we just adopt this template, we know what we want to take out and throw out, but we'll at least be in compliance. Page 12, cemetery records. Last I heard, we don't have a cemetery here, do we? Unless there's somebody buried over in Volunteer Park.
Or there's somebody in the basement,
Right. That could be.
which there may very well
That
be.
could be. Justice of the peace records. We don't have a justice of the peace.
Yeah.
Mayor's court. Engineering records. Again, we offload our engineering. Street records, we would have that. Financial records, that's something we would be doing. So I want us to adopt it, and then I want to task everybody with look at your particular department and say, that's not what we have, that's not what we need, or let's do something different.
So Terry, when there was a period of transition in 2014, 15, and 16, there were a number of records that to this day we can't find that may be listed here. What is the liability of the village in terms of those items that just inadvertently were not kept track of?
Well, two questions. Is it we don't know what we don't know, or we know we don't have it?
Okay.
Because if we don't know what we don't know, we can never guess what they would be. But if we know that, oh gosh, there were records from 1954 that were destroyed, then we just make sure that it's consistent with the records destruction policy. And there's an RC1, I think, which is your catalog. And we would just say records, fire runs 1954 through 1967 destroyed. And we're authorized.
Okay.
It's when you don't have a time period that you expose yourself. If you create a time period and know that you've already destroyed those records, it's just documenting it. So you can see this is so pervasive, it covers just about every type of community in the state of Ohio. And that was the goal when they created this through the historical connection, was let's put this large document together and let people pare it down. But if we keep waiting to pare it down, we'll never get started on the process of having a policy in place.
I agree. So before we talk further about that, can we talk a little bit about people's roles in this process? So we recently passed legislation with council that appointed Paula and Denise as our records retention folks to be trained on a regular basis. I believe Paula has signed up for training and Denise has also at this point. So that being the case, when it comes to this process that we're talking about today, what is their role other than fulfilling records requests?
The primary role is to fill records requests. So when a records request comes in, and most of the records we're getting are, can I get a copy of the incident report?
Right.
Can I get a copy of that crash report? And those are easy. When other records would come in, anybody can be the records person to receive the request. But it's a good idea if you're not here that day and they give it to Andy, Andy then turns it over to you so you can track it. And then unusual requests, I've oftentimes had a community call me and say, help with this. And one of the rules with records production is if it's necessary to have legal counsel review it, you're allowed additional time to produce it. You're allowed that additional time. So I have a form, and I don't know if I've given it to you, that we developed through the city of Montgomery that has like 28 categories. That when someone says, I want a record, and if you don't produce it, you check one of those 28 and you're telling them why you can't get it. More often than not, what I've found through the years is the record that's not produced is because we don't have to keep that kind of a record.
Right.
When someone says, I want to know how many times you stopped a black car on Vera Avenue in the last 6 months, we don't keep that. If you want to know, I want to see a copy of the incident report from July 6, 2021, when you stopped a black car on Vera Avenue. There it is. But I do not have to create records. And more often than not, that's where we're checking that box. I don't have to create this record for you. But the issue becomes if we don't have a policy, we don't have a destruction schedule, and somebody makes a request, we're exposing ourselves to liability. This gets a big head start on it.
So what does this body need to do? Should we make a recommendation to council to pass the RC2?
No, it comes from us and stays with us.
Okay.
So it would just be that our records commission makes a recommendation that we adopt currently the Ohio Municipal Records Manual model policy, and that we then try to update it more specific to the Village of Gulf Manor.
Second. No, nothing.
I made the motion.
No, second.
Got all that?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a second and a motion on the floor. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Okay.
And you'll find when you go to the training, they'll talk about this.
I've been before, yes, so I'm going more for the new stuff that's coming out, like you said, body cam and all this stuff, so that I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, because I don't know if they even have that addressed in here. Police Department records. Starts on page 21.
It's- I just see the radio and phone call audio recordings, I don't see anything about body cam.
Yeah, see, this is not really updated for booking videotape recording. What might not be a bad idea is that in this motion, we amended also to indicate we're going to specifically substitute the Lexipol policy for how long we retain video camera evidence and continue to work with our outside provider to determine if that needs to be refined. And then we would put that policy in here with what we send to Columbus.
Chief, were there any specific issues that you were sensitive to that you wanted us to make sure we're on our radar as we start this process?
Yeah, one thing I want people to be aware of is we'll have to add redaction software for the video that can blur faces that don't need to be released to the public. There's also some audio capabilities in there also. If an uninvolved party is.
This is something we need to purchase
Yeah.
at this point?
Yeah.
Okay.
And looking at different options, what we found is the option that makes the most sense for us is to use the WatchGuard product that's designed for their software. There's a lot of aftermarket products out there, and they may look cheaper on the surface, but they're not designed to work specifically with WatchGuard. So we believe it's our best option to use the WatchGuard software. It's a lot less labor intensive. It's more intuitive to work with their system.
Okay. Paula, Denise, do either of you have any questions about this commission, the process, your roles, life in general, why the Bengals lost?
No, just when I can get the go-ahead and we can get a shredder company involved and clean out that downstairs.
So that's a question that I have, because I would think it would either be you or Chris that are more familiar with the paper down there. How far back does that go? Is that like forever?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the further back it goes, the more organized it is. There were fewer records. It's been gone through, and things that didn't need to be retained aren't. As you get closer to current times, everything is still kept. Because this process we need to get into it for sure. We're also pressed for space, so things are tightly compacted.
Right.
So by current times, are you talking 3 years, 5 years, 10 years?
10, 15.
15 is current times, okay. A lot of stuff then.
So in our announcements for the committee this evening, we stated, I guess I didn't state that, I thought I did, even went look for it. The next scheduled meeting, if we do this every 6 months, would be on Monday, September 12th at 5:30 PM, but it sounds like Mr. Donellan is recommending we convene again in 2 months, which would put us at Monday, April 11th at 5:30 PM. Would somebody like to make a motion to meet at that time?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Any opposed?
And I think to clear the record, I had made a motion that we not only approve this RC2, which we've all approved, but that we supplement with this submission, the Lexipol policy relative to video camera and audio camera, to at least have that in place and then refine it for our meeting in 2 months. So that we
That's your
clearly,
motion?
yeah, we clearly have that record in there, because it's not anywhere mentioned in that model policy, video data.
So Mr. Donellan made the motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, any other business for this evening?
We will have another member. We have to report a resident. Mr. Earth is the chief executive officer. He has the authority to make that appointment. So for our next meeting, we'll have a resident appointed who will also be on our commission. The statute says the chief executive officer, the chief fiscal officer, the chief legal officer, and the resident are the members of the commission. We can appoint additional members, but they're the members. So we'll need to make sure we update that. And Chief, I'm going to give you this Columbus Police Department to let you look at it and see, are there any practices in there that we want to adopt? I do see they have mobile video recordings, 90 days and less tagged. So they may already have some of that information that we can quickly adapt.
Yeah. And I will be there tomorrow too, so I can check if
It's
it's the most current.
to save you time. It begins on page 35 of the 38 pages.
Okay.
And Denise, you can have one too. There's one section that I'm not sure we need. It's manure disposal records, since we do not have any. I'm assuming it's because they force it. But, maybe that's general category. But that satisfies our records commission.
Okay, if there's nothing else, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
A second?
I'll
I think Denise motioned. Mr. Dolan, you second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time this evening.
See fingerprints or 50 years.
Are we off?
Okay. You're not getting rid of those, you get some fingerprints.